Stuart, you're in about an hour's time, you're on your way to London. Can you tell us why? What is this about?
Well, I'm going to be researching the legal practicalities of bringing the inevitable legal challenge against the Crown and the United Kingdom Justice Secretary for what are clearly the unlawful failures of those public authorities to meet their duties, which are ensuring that we have the proper rule of law and the good administration of justice and good governance in Jersey. For example, when you have a system whereby the actual chief of police can be unlawfully suspended and he be denied due process, that's little more than an all-out unlawful assault on proper, objective and impartial policing. Now, this is plainly a breakdown in the rule of law in Jersey, and clearly the United Kingdom authorities are always immensely reluctant to act and to meet their duties, so it's perhaps been an inevitability that always it was going to take a legal challenge to force their hand. I'm going to be doing some groundwork in the next few days, examining the practicalities. I'll be speaking to perhaps a couple of lawyers. I'll be speaking to the court officials about the procedures involved in lodging the action, things of that nature.
So your case basically revolves round, it seems a pretty slim case, just on the chief, what happened to Graham Power, the former chief police. Is that what the whole basis of your case against the rule of law broken down in Jersey?
With all due respect, that's not a slim case. The illegal suspension of the police chief is a dramatic and utterly profound case on its own, even if there were not all of the other evidenced and profound concerns about Jersey's public authorities. Even if it was only the suspension of Graham Power we were talking about, that of itself represents an unlawful, politicised hijacking of objective policing in Jersey. It is a breakdown in the proper rule of law. On its own, that case would be sufficient. But you're quite right, there are other issues. There is the clearly unlawful failure of Jersey's public authorities to protect vulnerable children, the governance failures that represents, and still the despicable and disgusting display of all of Jersey's public authorities in the last 4 or 5 years, who have shown repeatedly that not only are they incapable of addressing the disastrous failings of past decades, they still to this day want to cover it up. And clearly, if vulnerable children can't be protected by the institutions of state and the rule of law in Jersey, within Jersey's apparatus, clearly that's a matter for the United Kingdom authorities.
What the English law courts or Ministry of Justice and the rest of it, I'm sure, are going to say to you, well, you've got to exhaust all your appeal avenues over here, haven't you? Was that what they're going to say?
Oh, without question, that will be one of the arguments they will advance. No doubt that will probably be one of their major arguments. But some people may recollect that I was a party to an action in the UK High Court some years ago when the child protection failures first came to light, and I argued then that Jersey's prosecution function was structurally incapable of properly addressing these criminal acts. And on that occasion our application was thrown out, and you're exactly correct, they used that argument. That was the finding of the court. They said, well, you know, before you challenge the United Kingdom Justice Secretary for what you claim are unlawful structural failings within Jersey's prosecution system, you ought to at least try and challenge it in the Jersey courts. Well, it so happens that that's now been done. I have tried to question in court, and I've tried to challenge the lawfulness, the structural legality of the Jersey prosecution system in court now on no less than 4 separate occasions, both in the Royal Court and the Court of Appeal. On all occasions it's been rejected. It's not even been prepared to be examined. So now there is in fact no other avenue. This is, the decks are clear, so to speak, for that challenge in the United Kingdom courts, because ultimately this is a failure of the United Kingdom Justice Secretary, and quite regardless of those arguments which they will deploy, the fact remains this is a United Kingdom public authority exercising United Kingdom laws in the United Kingdom, and therefore United Kingdom courts have jurisdiction over these issues, and one way or another we will hold this UK public authority to account in the UK courts.
It's been going on for years. The British government have been well aware of what's been going on over here, and they've never done anything.
The things are different this time. The Jersey judiciary and its allies and visiting members, so to speak, in a number of different cases during the last 4 or 5 years have utterly discredited themselves. In many ways they've engaged in activities, and I'm not referring only to my cases, other cases. They've made decisions and engaged in procedures that are wholly extraordinary and quite unlawful, and they're not sustainable in a court of law if one was looking at these things objectively and professionally. You're quite right, these kind of things usually are just allowed to drift because people don't have the determination to actually fight them properly through the United Kingdom courts. Well, that is different this time. This is a new era. We have citizens' media. We can get the truth out there. We are citizens' journalists. We can research the matters, and we can work together, and we can try and actually ensure that we do end up having the proper rule of law in Jersey. Because at the moment, the way Jersey's public authorities operate is not that dissimilar to Putin's Russia. All meaningful power is in the hands of an oligarchy, and they don't like free speech. They don't like any challenge to their hold on power or their status or their authority. And in the West, at least, we're supposed to have an objective and impartial judiciary and an objective police system that protects people and stops abuse of powers. Jersey, we don't have that, and that's a failing of the Crown. Policing in Jersey has always been politicised. It's a feudal system. Effectively, you're looking at the ruling elite in Jersey, which form a kind of feudal court in the old-fashioned sense, and the people beneath them are their vassals. Now, you're either one of their vassals, you either do their bidding, in which case you don't get investigated by the police and you don't get prosecuted. Or if you're not one of their vassals and you do something annoying or problematic to the oligarchy, to the feudal elite, then the police force and the prosecution system gets used against you to silence and oppress you. And this is how society used to be hundreds of years ago. In Jersey, here in the 21st century, it is exactly the same. Clearly, the policing function and the prosecution function in Jersey are structurally unlawful. Already, they are simply not compatible with established European Convention on Human Rights case law. And the only way, clearly, that it's going to get changed is by requiring the UK authorities to meet their obligations.
But the question is, how are you going to do this? I mean, it's a huge challenge, surely, to get one person to go over to London to get inevitably to attempt to get London to step in and restore the rule of law in Jersey. There's no civil unrest over here or anything. How successful,
There are many dramatic cases in Jersey, just from recent years, let alone earlier years, that one can use as evidenced examples to show that there is a breakdown in the rule of law. And let's be clear about this. A breakdown in the rule of law doesn't necessarily mean people rioting in the streets. A breakdown in the rule of law means what it says, a breakdown in the proper, objective and impartial functioning of the law. Now that has happened, and we can prove it by citing various evidenced examples. For example, the suspension of Graham Power, clearly an illegal act. That was a breakdown in the rule of law. The acts of Jersey's public authorities to cover up decades of child abuse, again, simply a breakdown in the rule of law. There are numerous examples. But one of the crucial things to remember about all this is, even if, let's say hypothetically, Jersey's voting systems worked properly and were democratic, even if it were a genuine majority will of the population, that the states did act corruptly and unlawfully and covered up all of these failings and malfeasances over the years and the decades, still that would be illegal, because the rule of law and popular will democratically are not the same thing. If you go just by popular will and what most people might think, then you have simply mob rule. The reason we have courts, the reason we have laws, the reason we have the European Convention on Human Rights is to protect minorities, to guarantee to the small ordinary person who doesn't have power and wealth or the might of the state behind them, the ordinary powerless individual is protected by the rule of law, or at least they should be and are in most Western democracies. They're not in Jersey. So even if it was only 10 people we were talking about who are being oppressed by the Jersey system, still that's unlawful.